I never thought I'd attend my husband's funeral and see him smiling in the corner of the room. Yes, you heard that right. Smiling. Alive. While everyone around me wore black, sobbing and clinging to tissues, I stood frozen, unable to breathe. My heart didn't ache the way you'd expect. Instead, it hammered with confusion and dread. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, even looked away and back again. But he was still there. That same gray suit he loved. That sly smile he wore when he thought he'd gotten away with something. I was sure it was him. Not a look-alike. Not a ghost. Him. Let me take you back a bit. So you understand why that moment shattered everything I thought I knew. My name is Teresa, but most people call me Tessa. I'm a 72-year-old grandmother, mother of 3, and widow. Or at least I thought I was. For most of my life, I played the role of the strong, loving matriarch. I baked the pies, mended the wounds, listened to heartbreaks, and kept the family together through every storm. My husband, Mauricio, was the steady hand beside me for over 50 years. At least, that's what I believed. We met young, 17 and 19, at a neighborhood dance. He had this charm, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. He wasn't the best-looking man, but when he laughed, it was infectious. We married 2 years later, built a house with our own hands, and filled it with laughter, arguments, kids, and dreams. We weren't rich, but we made it work. He became a car mechanic. I worked at a bakery until I had the kids. We shared everything, money, decisions, burdens, or so I thought. The last few years of our marriage were calm. Too calm, maybe. Mauricio had grown quiet, especially after his heart attack 2 years ago. I chalked it up to age, health scares, and the quiet settling of old age. We still had our routines. Coffee in the morning, walks around the block, Saturday dinners with the kids and grandkids. I thought that peace meant everything was fine. I had no reason to believe otherwise, until the day he collapsed in the garden. It was sudden. He was watering the roses when he just dropped. No cry, no warning, just fell like a puppet whose strings were cut. The doctors said it was his heart again. Too damaged, too weak. He died in the ambulance. Just like that, my life shifted into a fog. The next few days passed in a blur. Funeral arrangements, condolences, casseroles, and tears. I moved like a machine, doing what was expected of me. Until the day of the service. I arrived at the funeral home early, wanting to have a few moments alone before the rest of the family arrived. I stepped into the hall and froze. There he was, in the corner, leaning against the wall like he always did at parties when he didn't want to talk to anyone. His eyes met mine, and he smiled. That same crooked, half-teasing smile he used when he thought I was being too serious. I didn't scream. I didn't faint. I just stood there, trembling, thinking my grief had finally snapped something inside me. Then I looked again, and he was gone. The room was empty except for the casket at the front, closed, surrounded by flowers. I walked up slowly, my legs unsteady. I tried to open it, to see with my own eyes, but one of the staff gently stopped me. The casket was sealed. His wish, they said. He didn't want anyone to see him like that. That struck me as odd. Mauricio was vain, yes, but he was also traditional. He believed in open caskets, in facing death with dignity. I couldn't understand why he'd want to be hidden in death. I sat down in the front row, staring at the flowers, at the photo they chose of him, one from our 40th anniversary. I looked around at the others arriving. Our children, their spouses, the grandkids, neighbors. Everyone grieving, everyone acting normal. I felt like the only person who didn't belong in that moment, like I was watching a play, and someone had forgotten to give me my script. After the service, I pulled my oldest daughter aside. I asked her gently if anyone else had seen anything strange. She gave me that look, the one people give when they think you're slipping. "No, Mom," she said, placing her hand on mine. "You're just overwhelmed. It's the grief." I nodded, pretending to believe her, but I knew what I saw. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photo of us on the dresser. Something gnawed at me, something deep and sharp. I began going through old files, documents, receipts, bank statements, not out of suspicion at first, just habit. looking for comfort in the mundane. That's when I saw the first red flag. A withdrawal. $5,000? Made the day before he died? I don't remember him mentioning it. It wasn't in our shared account. It came from another account I didn't recognize. One I hadn't known existed. My breath caught. I dug deeper, fingers trembling. There were transfers going back months. Small amounts, scattered across unfamiliar bank names. I called the bank the next morning, pretending to be checking on some routine paperwork. The account had been opened under his name, but with a different contact number and email. I asked for a mailing address. The clerk hesitated, then said it was a P.O. box in a nearby town. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in silence. That's when the cold truth started to creep in. What if he hadn't died? What if that smile wasn't a hallucination? What if my husband, the man I trusted with everything, had been hiding a life from me for years? I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. They already thought I was losing my mind. But I knew I needed answers. I needed to understand why my world had cracked open and what lay beneath the pieces. So I decided to follow the trail myself. The next morning I packed a small bag, just enough for a day trip, and told my daughter I needed some time at the spa. A lie, yes, but a necessary one. If I told anyone the truth, that I was chasing a ghost, my supposedly dead husband, they'd lock me in a room and throw away the key. I wasn't ready to be labeled senile. Not yet. I was sharp, observant, and more than anything, I was determined. The town with the P.O. box was only 2 hours away. A quiet place with wide streets and sleepy shops. The kind of town people retire to when they want peace. I walked into the post office like I belonged there, clutching a fake envelope I'd written Mauricio's name on. The clerk barely looked at me before asking for ID. I smiled, feigned confusion, and pretended I was his wife picking up a package. He frowned but didn't push too hard. Still, he refused to give me any information. "Privacy laws," he said. But when I stepped aside and waited, I watched. I watched every person who came in and left. And then, after about 40 minutes, a man walked in. Tall gray hair, average build. He wasn't my husband. But when he opened box 114, I saw the name on the label of the envelope. Mauricio D. I followed him out. My heart was pounding. I felt foolish and alive all at once. I kept my distance, watching him walk to an old brown sedan. He drove off and I got into my car, hands shaking as I followed him. It felt like I'd stepped into a movie, the kind where the quiet grandmother becomes a detective. He stopped at a modest one-story house in the suburbs. No lawn ornaments, no barking dogs, just an ordinary house. He went inside. I sat in my car for a long time, debating. Then I got out and walked past, casually. Through the window, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A picture frame on the mantel. It was a photo of Mauricio with another woman and 2 teenagers. My legs nearly gave out. I had to sit on the curb to breathe. I couldn't hear anything but the roaring in my ears. There he was, smiling, alive, and standing beside a whole other family. My brain tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a cousin, a long-lost relative. But no, it was him, the man I buried, the man I mourned, the man I saw in the corner of his own funeral. I took out my phone, snapped a photo through the window, and left before someone saw me. I drove back home in silence, not even turning on the radio. My thoughts were loud enough. When I got home, I poured myself a drink, something I rarely do, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the photo on my phone. How long had this been going on? Who were they? And most importantly, why? The next day, I went back to our home office and pulled out the safe. I opened it and found more documents I had ignored for years. Deeds, life insurance papers, account summaries. But there was one folder I hadn't seen before. Inside were printed emails, dozens of them, some going back over a decade, all between him and a woman named Isabel. They weren't just friendly notes. They were intimate, full of inside jokes, old memories, and plans. Plans for vacations, plans for retirement, plans for a future that didn't include me. I couldn't cry. Not yet. The betrayal was too big, too wide to feel all at once. It came in pieces, like cold wind blowing through a cracked window. Each word I read made the hole wider. I realized he'd been funding their life using our money. Not all of it, just enough to go unnoticed. He'd hidden the transfers, disguised them as medical expenses or home repairs. He'd even cashed out part of his pension early. I had never questioned it. I trusted him, and that trust had made me blind. My first instinct was to confront them. But what would I say? Show up on their porch like a mad woman and scream at a man who was supposed to be dead? No, I needed a plan, proof, a reason for whatever came next. So I started digging. I found their address, their utility bills under her name, school records for the kids. Twins, age 17. He'd been in their lives from the beginning. Their birth certificates even listed him as the father. He hadn't just cheated on me. He'd built a second life, a parallel family, a world I was never supposed to discover. But now I had, and I wasn't gonna let it go. I made copies of everything. Photos, emails, records. I stored them on a flash drive and hid it in the hem of a coat I rarely wore. I wasn't sure what I would do with it yet, but something told me this was just the beginning. Then something strange happened. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. The handwriting was familiar. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sentence. "Stop digging. You don't want to know what comes next." I stared at those words for hours. He knew I was onto him, which meant he was watching me. He was alive, and now he was warning me. For the first time in my life, I was afraid to be alone in my own house. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of shadow felt like it carried eyes. I double-checked the locks, closed the curtains, and kept a knife under my pillow at night. It felt ridiculous. An old woman playing spy in a story no one would believe. But that fear was real. That letter wasn't just a warning. It was a threat, and it meant Mauricio, the man I had buried, was alive and watching me. I didn't tell my children. I couldn't. They already thought I was fragile, lost in grief. If I told them their father faked his death and started a second family, they'd call someone to take my car keys away. No, I had to move carefully, quietly, but my instincts were on fire. Every day I felt like I was walking through fog, trying to make out the shape of the monster that had lived beside me for 50 years. I started watching the street from my kitchen window. I noted every unfamiliar car, every neighbor's movement. I even left my phone near the window, recording for hours while I pretended to nap. I was desperate to catch anything. I couldn't rest, not really. The thought of him out there, laughing, living, breathing. While I sat here with nothing but lies, it made me shake. Then something shifted. A few days after the letter, I noticed a man parked across the street. Same car, same spot. Every afternoon around the same time. He didn't get out, just sat there. I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I took a photo through the blinds. It wasn't Mauricio, but something told me he was connected. I waited. I watched. And when he got out of the car on the 5th day, I followed him. I didn't care that I was 72. I moved like a ghost, keeping distance, blending into the late afternoon crowd. He walked 2 blocks and entered a small cafe. I stood across the street, pretending to tie my shoe. He sat in a booth. Minutes later, someone joined him. Mauricio. I nearly screamed. There he was. No disguise. No shame. Just him. Older, tired, but alive. He wasn't even trying to hide. He laughed, nodded, sipped from a cup, like he had every right to be there. I stayed frozen, heart beating so fast I thought I'd collapse. I wanted to storm in, flip the table, demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. I took pictures. Not for revenge. For truth. I needed something tangible to hold. Something to prove to myself that this wasn't all in my head. I walked away before they noticed me, ducked into a bookstore, and sat in a corner pretending to read while my hands trembled on my lap. That night I cried for the first time, not because he betrayed me, but because I realized I never really knew him. The man I cooked for, raised children with, danced with in the kitchen, that man had a secret life for years. How do you reconcile that? How do you grieve a ghost who still walks around drinking coffee and living a lie? I spent the next few days gathering everything. I printed the photos, sorted the emails, organized the bank statements. My dining table became an evidence wall. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. And now I had the proof to show it. I decided to visit a lawyer, a young woman named Clara, who had helped one of my friends with a will dispute. I brought a folder, told her I needed advice. She listened, her expression unreadable until I showed her the photos. The emails, the letter. She looked up slowly. "Mrs. Duarte," she said carefully. "This is a serious matter. If your husband is alive, and he's collected life insurance under false pretenses, that's fraud. And if others helped him, that's conspiracy." I nodded, feeling sick. "Do you want to report it?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't know. Part of me wanted justice. Part of me wanted revenge. But another part, shamefully, just wanted him to come home and explain it all. Like there could still be an answer that would make this hurt less. Clara handed me a form. "Think about it. But the longer you wait, the harder this will be to prove. Especially if he disappears again." I left the office and walked for an hour without direction. My past, my marriage, my whole identity had unraveled. I was no longer a widow. I was the abandoned wife of a liar. The punchline in a story he wrote behind my back. Later that night, I opened the safe again. This time, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A key taped to the inside of the lid. I didn't recognize it. Small brass, old. I knew Mauricio kept a storage unit years ago, claiming it was for old car parts. I never went with him. I never asked. I found the receipt in a file labeled Garage, 2006. The unit was still active. The next morning I went. It was in a different town, an hour's drive from home. The place was nearly empty, dusty, quiet. I gave the manager the number and he pointed me down the row. My hand shook as I slid the key into the lock. What I found inside changed everything. There were no car parts, no tools, just boxes. Dozens of them stacked neatly, labeled with names I didn't know. I opened one and found passports. Dozens! All with Mauricio's face, but different names, different nationalities, fake identities. In another box, I found phones, burners, SIM cards, notebooks full of numbers, ledgers, a list of names, payments. It was a web. Mauricio hadn't just lied to me. He was running something far bigger, something dangerous. I stood there in that cold, dusty storage unit, staring at a life I never knew my husband lived. Fake passports, untraceable phones, foreign currency, codes scribbled into worn notebooks. It was as if I had stumbled into the hidden lair of a stranger, not the man I had shared my bed with for 50 years. The quiet, dependable mechanic who used to bring me flowers every Sunday was gone. In his place was a ghost wrapped in secrets and lies. I pulled out a box marked with a name I didn't recognize. Luis Contreras. Inside were photos, not of me, not of our kids, but of him with other people. Airports, offices, bars, men in suits, sometimes with stacks of cash on the table. Others looked like surveillance photos. He was tracking people, or being tracked. I didn't know which was worse. My knees buckled, and I sat on the cold concrete floor, trying to breathe. This was no ordinary affair. No midlife crisis with a second family on the side. Mauricio had been living multiple lives. He had built identities like masks, slipping them on and off at will. I felt the walls closing in. What was he? A con artist? A spy? A criminal? I thought of the kids, the grandkids, and how I'd tell them any of this. How do you explain that your father or grandfather might not even be who he said he was? I opened another box. This one had files stamped in Spanish. Government seals. Some looked like intelligence reports. Others were redacted so heavily they were unreadable. One file had a black and white photo of a man lying face down in a pool of blood. Mauricio's name was on the cover. My stomach turned. I dropped it and backed away. My phone buzzed. A blocked number. I hesitated, then answered. A voice. Calm. Familiar. Tessa, you should have left it alone. It was him. I froze. Couldn't speak. I never meant for you to find this, he continued. But now that you have, you're in danger. I wanted to scream, to ask him what the hell was going on. But all I managed was one word. Why? There was a pause. Then he whispered, because I lied to protect you. The line went dead. I sat there, in the silence of that unit, heart pounding, mind racing. Protect me from what? From who? Was this some twisted version of love? Or just another layer of manipulation? I couldn't tell anymore. Back home, I took every document, every photo, and scanned them. I uploaded the files to a secure cloud. sent copies to Clara, and locked the originals in my old sewing box. I wasn't going to let him erase the truth. Not now. Not after everything. But the fear settled in my bones. I started noticing people watching me. At the grocery store. At the park. Once I saw a man standing across the street at night smoking. Just staring. When I called out, he disappeared. My lights would flicker at odd times. My emails were bouncing. I wasn't paranoid. I was being watched. Clara called 2 days later. Her voice was tense. Mrs. Duarte, some of the files you sent me, they reference a case I worked on 5 years ago. It was sealed. Classified. Government level. My blood ran cold. She continued. If your husband was involved in this, he's not just a con artist. He might have been working with, or against, very powerful people. This isn't just a personal betrayal anymore. This is dangerous. She recommended I go to the police. But how could I? What would I say? That my dead husband was actually alive, had a second family, and might have worked for a shadow organization. They'd laugh me out of the building, or worse, they'd lock me away for good. I had no allies except Clara, and even she was growing hesitant. I decided to write everything down, not just for legal reasons, but because I needed to make sense of it. Every lie, every hint, every time something felt off during our marriage. The way he always knew more than he let on. How he had no family history. How he never let me do the taxes. Little things like puzzle pieces I'd never thought to fit together. The truth was, Mauricio had never truly existed. Not the way I thought. He was an illusion, a perfectly crafted mask. And I had loved that mask with my whole heart. I still did in some broken, foolish way. But now I needed to outlive him. One night, as I was writing, I received another letter. Slipped under my door. No stamp. Just a note. Meet me. No police. No questions. I'll tell you everything. It was signed with an address and a time. The next evening. Part of me wanted to burn the letter and forget everything. To walk away and live whatever years I had left in peace. But another part, the part that had held our family together through decades, needed closure. I needed to look him in the eyes and hear the truth. Not on the phone. Not through shadows. In my bones. I knew this meeting would change everything. And I was ready for it. I didn't sleep the night before the meeting. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, playing every possible scenario over in my mind. Would he show up alone? Would it be a trap? Would I even recognize the man who was once my husband? I couldn't decide what scared me more. The danger I might be walking into or the truth I might finally hear. Morning came slowly, dragging behind it a storm of dread. The address led me to an old train station on the outskirts of town, long abandoned and surrounded by overgrown weeds. I parked far enough away to see if I was being followed, then walked the rest of the distance with my phone in one hand and a can of pepper spray in the other. I had tucked Clara's card into my pocket and left a note on my kitchen table just in case. I wasn't stupid. I was scared, but I wasn't stupid. Inside the station, dust floated like ghosts in the morning light. The air smelled of rust and old wood. I stepped carefully, each footstep echoing louder than the last. I was alone, or so I thought, until I heard the soft click of a door opening behind me. I turned. There he was, Mauricio, older, thinner, a streak of silver through his hair. But it was him. His eyes locked with mine. And for a second, I didn't know if I wanted to scream or cry. He looked at me like I was both a memory and a ghost. Then he spoke. "Thank you for coming." I didn't reply. I couldn't. He gestured to an old bench. We sat, the silence between us louder than any words. I finally broke it. "Why?" His shoulders sagged. "I wanted to tell you years ago, but I couldn't. Not without putting you in danger." I stared at him cold. "Danger? From what, your double life? Your lies?" He ran a hand over his face, clearly worn. "I wasn't just running another family, Tessa. That part I won't defend. It was a mistake, one I can never fix. But the rest? I had to disappear. I was working with the Brazilian Federal Police, deep undercover." I blinked. "What?" He nodded. "Back in the 90s, I got pulled into a sting operation. They needed someone like me, someone clean, invisible, with no criminal ties. I fit the profile. At first, it was small-time smuggling rings. Then it grew. Trafficking, arms, people with powerful connections. I was in too deep. They built me new identities, one for every circle I had to infiltrate. I lived half-lives for decades. I tried to understand. My mind swam with images of him kissing me goodnight before disappearing into darkness. Why not tell me? They wouldn't let me. They said the risk was too high, that if anyone found out you knew, you'd become a target. I believed them. I kept you in the dark to keep you safe. I thought if I could finish the mission, I could come back. But you didn't come back, I said, voice trembling. You died. We buried you. He looked away. That wasn't planned. The heart attack was real. But when the agency realized I was going to survive, they used it. Faked the death certificate. Closed the operation. Gave me new orders. I had to disappear. Again. And the other family? I asked bitter. He didn't answer right away. It started as cover, but I got lost. I forgot where the lies ended and the life began. My hands curled into fists. You let me mourn you. You let me believe I was a widow. For what? Duty? Or because you didn't care anymore? His eyes filled with tears. Tessa, I've thought of you every single day. I never stopped loving you. But I didn't know how to come back from what I'd done. And now I'm dying. The words hit me like a slap. What? I have cancer. Lungs. They don't give me long. That's why I wanted to see you. To tell you everything. To apologize. To give you something before I'm gone for real this time. He pulled an envelope from his coat and handed it to me. I hesitated before taking it. It's all there, he said. The truth. The files, the names, the people involved. You can take it to the police, to the press. Whatever you want. I won't stop you. I didn't open it. I couldn't yet. And what do you want from me? He looked down at his hands. Forgiveness. Or at least understanding. I stood. My legs trembled. My heart burned with betrayal and pity all at once. You ruined my life, Mauricio. You ruined our family. But you also saved people, didn't you? He nodded. Yes. I turned to leave, then paused. I'll decide what to do with this, I said, holding the envelope. But don't contact me again. He didn't fight me. Just nodded, eyes glistening. I walked away, and this time, he didn't follow. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was walking towards something instead of running from it. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the envelope for hours. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I poured myself a cup of coffee, but it went cold untouched. That envelope wasn't just paper. It was a ticking bomb. One that held not only Mauricio's truth, but a web of corruption, betrayal, and possibly crimes buried under decades of lies. I had wanted the truth. Now it sat right in front of me, and I wasn't sure I wanted it anymore. When I finally opened it, I did so like I was opening a wound. Inside were files, printed photos, contact lists, financial records, and a small flash drive. The documents were clear. Names of corrupt officials, laundering networks, surveillance logs. Mauricio had been deeply involved in dismantling something enormous. Some of the people listed were recognizable. Judges, businessmen, politicians. I felt dizzy. This wasn't just a lie about love. It was a war fought in silence, and I had been sleeping beside one of its soldiers. But that wasn't all. At the very bottom of the envelope was a letter, handwritten, for me. It read, Tessa, if you're reading this, I probably don't have much time left. I won't make excuses for what I did. I lied. I cheated. I broke your heart. But I also loved you. Every version of me. Mauricio, Luis, Daniel. They all loved you. I never meant to drag you into this world. But I couldn't leave without telling you the truth. There's a bank account in your name. No one else knows about it. Use it however you see fit. Burn this if you want. Or bring them all down. Just promise me one thing. Live the rest of your life free of my shadow. You deserve that. Meh, I cried then. Not out of love or sadness, but from the sheer weight of it all. The burden he left behind. The truth he dumped at my feet. For decades, I had shared my life with a man I thought I knew. I baked his favorite cakes, folded his shirts, listened to him snore at night. I thought I understood who he was, but I never knew him at all. Still, something in his letter reached me. A piece of him. Maybe the real him. Still lived in those words. And that part of him I missed deeply. I didn't tell the children. Not yet. I didn't know how. How do you tell your kids that their father lived 2 lives, and neither of them included the truth? That the man they buried might have been a hero and a liar in equal measure? I needed time, so I went to the cemetery. I stood at his headstone, unsure what to say. A grave with no body, just a name carved in stone. A name that meant nothing now. Mauricio Duarte. Father, husband, a ghost. I saw you, I whispered. I saw everything. The wind blew softly, as if listening. I pulled the flash drive from my purse and looked at it. It felt like a weapon, or a key. I left it there on the cold stone, wrapped in plastic. Let the past bury the past, I thought. But by the time I returned home, I changed my mind. I couldn't let it go. The next morning, I went to Clara and handed her everything. I don't want revenge, I said. I want protection. For me, for my family. And I want the truth to matter. She looked through the files and nodded. This is enough to trigger an investigation. A big one. Within days, she contacted federal authorities. And then the phone calls started. First the police, then reporters, then people I didn't know. They wanted interviews, statements, details. I said nothing. I let Clara handle it. She told them I was a grieving widow, recently traumatized, unsure of what I'd seen. It was a smart move. It bought me space, but things didn't quiet down. A week later, a black car followed me from the grocery store. 2 days after that, my back gate was found open, footprints in the dirt. I knew then that Mauricio's enemies were real, and they were watching. Clara arranged for protection. A discreet unit stationed in my neighborhood. I installed cameras, alarms. I no longer left the house without checking every mirror twice. I had been pulled into his world, whether I liked it or not. But here's the thing. Despite the fear, the betrayal, and the ruin he left behind, I felt strong. Stronger than I had in years. For decades, I had been the good wife, the patient mother, the loving grandmother. I had lived a quiet life, a hidden one. Now, for the first time, I was living loudly. Not for him, not for his secrets, but for me. I called my children for dinner one night. I didn't tell them everything, just what they needed to know. Your father wasn't who we thought, I said gently. But he was brave and very, very broken. They didn't ask too many questions. I think they saw something in my eyes that made them stop. They hugged me harder that night. They said nothing, but I knew they knew the truth was heavy. And still I held it, because it was mine. Weeks passed, and the chaos slowly shifted into silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, watchful quiet that comes after a storm. The authorities moved quickly, faster than I expected. People named in the documents Mauricio left were investigated. A few arrested. A scandal unraveled in headlines. But my name never appeared in them. Clara made sure of that. I was the invisible thread pulling on a knot of power, and no one outside that circle would know it. I thought exposure would bring relief, closure, but it didn't. It brought emptiness. It turns out when the truth finally lands, it doesn't come with a bow. It crashes like glass, and afterward you have to decide whether to sweep it away or walk barefoot through the pieces. So I made a choice. I packed a suitcase, not large, just enough to start over. I didn't tell anyone at first. I just woke up one morning, made coffee, folded my favorite scarf, and stared out the window. I saw the place differently now. The yard where I once planted roses with Mauricio now looked like a stage. The walls held too many echoes. The table where we used to play cards felt haunted, not by ghosts but by silence. I left the house to my daughter. She tried to stop me, begged me to stay. But I kissed her cheek and told her I had more chapters to write. I wasn't running. I was reclaiming. I moved to a smaller town near the coast. I found a quiet cottage with a garden and a view of the ocean. There were no memories in the walls, just sea breeze and space to breathe. I started taking walks, joined a reading club, and volunteered at the local shelter. People called me Teresa there, just Teresa. No one asked about my past, and I didn't offer it. I began journaling every day, not out of sadness, but survival. I needed to make sense of everything that had happened. to give it form and shape. The lies, the betrayals, the shock of seeing a dead man smile. And through the words, I found myself again. One morning, while walking through the market, I passed a booth of old books. The vendor was an elderly man with kind eyes. He asked if I liked to read. I told him I used to. He handed me a copy of a mystery novel and said, "Sometimes the truth makes the best fiction." I smiled. That night I started writing. Not just journaling, but a story. A real one. Inspired by everything. The funeral. The man in the corner. The secret family. I changed names, shifted timelines, blurred the lines between fact and fiction. But at its core, it was my truth. It became a ritual. Every morning with coffee, every evening before bed. Paragraphs turned to pages, pages to chapters. I didn't know if it was any good, but I knew it mattered. Because in telling the story, I took back control. I wasn't the woman abandoned. I was the woman who uncovered a web, who faced a ghost, and chose to live anyway. I self-published the book a year later under a pseudonym. It didn't go viral. It didn't win awards, but a few people read it. Some sent messages, thanking the author for the raw honesty, for the courage. They didn't know it was me. That made it even more special. My secret just for me. Sometimes I still think about Mauricio. I wonder if he died in peace or in regret. If he meant what he said at the train station. If he ever truly planned to come home. But those thoughts no longer hurt. They pass like shadows across a sunny wall. Present, but not powerful. One day, I visited his grave again. I brought no flowers. Just the published copy of my book. I placed it against the stone and whispered, "This is the truth I choose to remember." And then I walked away, not as a widow, not as a victim, but as a woman who found her voice through ashes. My name is Teresa Duarte, and this is my story. If you made it this far, thank you for staying with me through every twist, secret, and revelation. Life isn't always what it seems. Sometimes the person closest to you is the one hiding the most. But I hope my story shows that even in the face of betrayal and loss, it's never too late to reclaim your power and write a new chapter. You are stronger than the lies that try to define you. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know you stayed with me until the end. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Your support means the world.